Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the next episode on the B2B Uncut podcast. I'm Sawyer Frank, joined today by Andy Wagner, Executive Director at AAXIS Digital. Hello, Andy. How are you doing today?
Hey, Sawyer. I am great. Thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you again.
Likewise. Andy and Oro Commerce, or AAXIS Digital and Oro Commerce, have been longstanding partners, helping digitally transform the B2B e-commerce space.
Yeah.
And Andy, I'd like to start by asking you a little bit about your background. Obviously, you've been around various different platforms as well as agencies. So I'd like to start there for today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Been around longer than I want to admit, but I've worked on the agency side at places like Digitas, Publicis. Spent a lot of time on the partner implementation side. Both here in the States, but also in the UK and in Italy. So really been bouncing around the world. And I've spent a lot of time really focusing on brands and helping them with e-commerce, with content, really engaging with their buyers through various online channels. And that's just grown over the years, the number of channels we have to play with. But yeah, commerce is the core of what I've been doing probably the last 18, 20 years, and love it, particularly in the B2B space where there's just so much opportunity now for B2B brands, distributors, wholesalers, manufacturers, that it's just a really exciting time. So great to be here and talk about some of the things that we're finding in the market.
Absolutely. And together we've helped some of the biggest manufacturers and distributors in the world. Hopefully we can point to a couple of those use cases today, but I figured today that we dive in a little bit further than the sales process that many perceive to be the case as they refer to the word commerce, right? Online buying, online selling. So let's go beyond buying online and talk about how B2B commerce can support buyers as well as sellers or even upstream in an organization and their operational needs. So from you, go ahead.
I think it's a really important topic because to your point, when most of the people that we talk to, they're focused on the e-commerce websites, and for good reason. And we could talk all day long about that. But what I'm not so sure everybody thinks about are the additional benefits that the sellers will get once they really start engaging in the digital commerce channel. So for some examples, think about customer service, think about the account managers or the sales reps, however you term them in your business, being able to have access to, your buyers, your customers' order history, forecasting, where things are in transit, in fulfillment, suddenly you have all this information at your fingertips. You're not having to ask colleagues or email back and forth. It's all right there. So ultimately, through the information that you're capturing in the digital commerce channel, you're able to better support your customers with far less effort. So an example of that is with Braskem. We were talking about them earlier. Fantastic company. We've been working with them for about 6 years now. Going on, just started 6 years. And they had an incredible journey, but what they're finding is some of the biggest benefits for them of not only the Oro commerce platform, but just the digital commerce channel in general is the efficiencies that they're seeing on the customer service side of the house. Being able to better support their customers, more quickly respond, and actually be proactive, as well as just getting rid of, thousands and thousands of manual hours for just silly tasks that they can now automate, or it's being done in the platform for them. So, there's a huge advantage there that isn't directly related to what we typically think of and talk about when we say, an e-commerce website or the buying, the transactional element of it.
Absolutely. So, obviously streamlining efficiency can lead to cost savings, and I'm certain that they've recognized some of that on their side. especially being a $24 billion company. As we look, kind of at the tool set that often is required to find these increased efficiencies to support just the e-commerce platform, what would you say in your mind are some of the tools that are most critical to finding those benefits?
So great question. Obviously it all starts with the core set of features that everybody sort of expects to support that transactional browse and buy online. But let's get beyond that. And this is actually one of the reasons why we really enjoy working with the Oro platform, because the original vision was, hey, let's combine CRM and commerce for B2B. And it wasn't just a nice to have, it makes a lot of sense. Why? Because of the complexities of buyer accounts and hierarchies, being able to manage that is absolutely critical, not only on the transactional side, but then as we think about customer service, sales reps, account managers, hey, suddenly I can start creating my portfolio of customers that are for me as a customer service representative or as an account manager. And so those capabilities are really, really important to have in the commerce platform. Okay. Why? So that when I log in, I'm not seeing, 15,000 customers. No, I'm seeing my, 100 customers or 50 customers, what it is. So I'm very focused on the information that I need and tasks at hand. So that's one big thing, being able to really get the customer information, combined with all of the transactional information, orders, and all that kind of stuff. And then there's another, piece that we found, not just with Braskem, but like other companies, and that is, has to do with integration, but it's bringing in to the e-commerce platform all the customer orders. Okay. And what I mean by that is you will obviously have the online orders available because they're captured in the platform. But what we very often will do is integrate with ERP or wherever that data is held, so that even their offline orders, whether they're placed through the sales rep on the phone and they enter them directly into the ERP or wherever they enter them, so that we have one place where the CSRs, account managers, they can see everything that customer is ordering. Okay. Whether it's online or offline. Okay. And when and where it came and all that kind of stuff. It's a pretty basic integration, but getting it organized so that it's easily consumable and easily searchable. That's the other sort of feature or aspect of this that you need to think about. But those made, I know for Braskem in particular, that made a huge difference. Having that ability within the commerce platform to connect the CSRs, the sales reps to my group of customers and organize customers in such a way that you can, easily manage them, track them, report on them, all that kind of stuff. So, those are really, really useful things. And it's something that in Oro, you guys have made it easy by virtue of the vision of the architecture of the platform.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd agree. I think to add on to that, and something that you touched on is permissions, right? From a customer service representative perspective, they might be managing 3,000 accounts versus the sales rep in a specific territory that's only managing 100. So obviously the rules behind permissions and different, hierarchies of business and territory, et cetera, is a critical element. So another thing to touch on, obviously you mentioned ERP integration. We've said it for the longest time, but bad data in means bad data out, or vice versa, right? So I think in general of adoption, you've got to promote a better user experience for your buyers as well as your sellers in order for them to adopt the solution. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's something to really think about. You need to be aware of all the warts. And they are going to exist, systems have evolved over years, if not decades. Okay. And you're not going to just suddenly throw everything out. Okay. And nor should you. But that's where technology today is getting really exciting. So yes, be very clear about what data you need. Be very clear about understanding the quality of that data. And then if you do need to do something about it or improve the quality, you have multiple options. And oftentimes we can solve that elegantly in the Oro platform. So the translation, or the extraction, can happen on the Oro side so that the ERP team, the PIM team, whoever, they don't need to change anything on their side. Okay. That makes for a far smoother, implementation process. But, beyond that, it's kind of related is this is a lot of these industries are very traditional still. You have customers who, and this may sound surprising, but they still want an email in an order. Okay. And, there are ways that we can even manage that, with today's technology. And in fact, we're doing that so that we can actually scan email orders and actually create an order automatically so that it's going straight into the system. You don't need a sales rep or a customer service person to kind of read the email and manually enter that into the system, which creates risk in that you miss a 0 or 2 zeros, so there's a lot you can do, but with the technology today. But you're absolutely right, Sawyer. Understanding the quality of your data and making sure we address any deficiencies is going to be key. And you also mentioned something, you're talking about permissions. It's not directly related to that, but the other thing that we're finding is because of the permissions, because of the way we can create customer groups, but we can also create customer service, like internal team groups. What this does is it allows the customer service reps to easily see, hey, who's the sales person or the account manager on this? Or vice versa. The sales and account team can say, hey, who's the CSR rep that sent this to my customer, right? That's all there in the platform. Okay. So again, operational efficiencies, making it easier to do what you need to do. There's a lot of benefits to sort of like the backside of e-commerce, if you will, if you use that in the right way, if you get it implemented correctly.
Absolutely. I think, to highlight a point there is to understand where your buyer's at and meet them in that current location. For example, I'd imagine that you at AAXIS have implemented a lot of projects and, there's different terminologies with our industry. Of course, there's e-commerce platforms, but we can also call it an e-shop or a customer service portal or, a self-service portal, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
Are there instances that you may be able to highlight where you are starting with an MVP rollout that ultimately doesn't involve buying and selling online, that it's just phase one?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, just the MVP approach in and of itself, and I don't want to digress and change the whole topic here, but it's a great way to start. Okay. Particularly if you don't have a lot of experience in the organization, start small, talk to your customers, understand what are the really big things that they want. And quite often, some of those things are what you just alluded to, which is, hey, we just want to be able to see what orders we have, when they're shipping, what the status is. Okay. I don't need to browse. I'm happy talking to Steve. I've known Steve for 15 years. He takes care of me. Okay. That's great. Okay. But being able to empower your customers with whatever you want to call it, but a self-service portal, there's a huge benefit to that. And what we've seen, some use cases we've seen is, as I mentioned, being able to see my orders, but also the tracking capabilities. So, in the B2B worlds, it's not always, FedEx and UPS, we're shipping trucks, we're shipping rail cars, and we can track that just like FedEx would track a package. So as a buyer, being able to understand where's my order, particularly if it's something like a rail car, I know that in my receiving locations, I may have room for 1 or 2 rail cars. Okay. So it's really critical that I can plan my loading and offloading so that I don't have things getting backed up, because that's going to cost me a lot of money. So something as simple as the self-service portal can really add value in those kind of scenarios. The other area is think about finance and payment. Okay. Understanding, hey, what's my current account levels? What outstanding invoices do I have? Can I pay them online right then and there? So being able to have access to that without having to call somebody as a customer is great for the accounts payable and also the accounts receivable on the side of the seller. And that stuff, again, it's really simple integration from a systems perspective. So it's not a big heavy lift. Yes, the value, you're saving people time. You're making it easy for people, both on the buying side and the selling side, to kind of do what they need to do. And so I think it's, to your point, it's a great place to start. If you don't feel that you're ready with your product information, or you think your products are too complex, look, start giving them some self-service capabilities, them being your customers, your buyers. It's a great way to get started. And it's a great way for your organization to start understanding, hey, what other things could we do that's going to make our lives easier, that's going to make us more efficient, So yeah, I think it's a great idea. And we generally will start with, if not transactional, then something around the self-service area to get people going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's obvious at this point that, the difference of B2C and B2B in its fundamental context is, it's not just 1-to-1 or a few to one, it's many to one. So on the context of shipping too, you might be shipping from multiple warehouses. You might be shipping thousands or 10,000s of line items. And of course, those might not all ship on the same date. Right.
Yeah. And honestly, that's a huge area for just about anybody in the B2B space, as you well know. I don't have to tell you that. But how do we make sure we can reduce human error? Okay. In other words, how can we make sure that either the buyer or on the seller side isn't shipping something to a location that they're not allowed to ship to? Okay. Or that whatever the rules are, being able to create workflows is something that we found is, immensely useful in these scenarios, because we can we can build guardrails into the system so that workflows are running in the background, always make sure it's like, oh, hey, no, you can't do that. Do this instead. All right. So that we're helping them minimize manual errors or just things that shouldn't happen. The same goes for being proactive and understanding, hey, when I'm getting communication from a buyer, something's gone wrong, that we can have workflows running in the background that can pick out these certain tags and surface that. So you can almost, prioritize, hey, what do I need to address? What's urgent? What's burning? What do I need to take care of? Right. So even on the commerce side, having those capabilities and having workflow capabilities to enable your processes so that you're minimizing mistakes and minimizing risk is another big area to look at. And we generally will spend a lot of time talking to our customers about, well, how do you do this? What goes wrong? What typically goes wrong? All right, well, let's make sure we build in some guardrails so we minimize that.
Awesome. So just a couple moments ago, you presented a scenario in which I believe the made up figure was Steve, and Steve still wants to work with his rep.
Yes, he does.
And, pick up the phone or send an email in an order. From your experience, aside from taking maybe just an MVP approach, what are some of the tactics that you've seen some of these manufacturers, distributors, or just generally speaking, merchants take to get Steve on board, to start getting him to come around, to find value in the online experience and potentially even using self-service capabilities, not just to maybe track shipments or make payments, but to begin to order them?
Yeah. So are you thinking more from the seller side? So the B2B company sales team going out to their customers, is that the angle you were thinking of?
I think it's a combination of both. So whether we want to start with sellers or buyers here, I think if Steve is the seller, how can we get Steve on board with his customers?
Yeah. So I mean, because you and I we've had this conversation many times. I'm from the seller's perspective, getting the account management team or the sales team on board can sometimes be problematic. There's this almost distrust or competition. They think, well, okay, now I got to compete with our online channel. That's not fair. And I don't want to use it because I get comments on what I do, all of those kind of things. And I understand it. And, but there are ways to work around that. And, you hit the nail on the head. The best way to do this is actually create valuable features that is going to help Steve, our seller, do his job and do his job more easily, and more effectively. So here's an example. We have a joint customer where one of the features that they've added is the ability for their customers, their buyers, to forecast their needs over the coming year. Okay. And think about having that information at your fingertips as Steve, the seller, because Steve knows what they're forecasting. Steve knows that they were forecasting, okay, we're going to need a big shipment, in June. Okay. Well, fantastic. Steve can start reaching out in May and say, hey, are we still on for this? Do you need me to adjust anything? Can we lock this down now? Okay. So, again, using the information that Steve would have access to in the self-service portal or the e-commerce platform can help them do their jobs more easily. They don't have to chase, hey, what's up? What's coming this year? They know. Okay. Now maybe not everybody is going to implement forecasting, but the other area we see where we can create value for the selling team is the data. Hey, you have a customer that very much has the same buying patterns as another customer, and here are the patterns. Okay. And so you can expose those patterns to Steve, and he can say, oh, right. Okay. Well, based on this, I should be talking to them about X, Y, and Z as well. Okay. Things that, I've never talked to them about, but I should mention it because there are other companies that have very similar buying patterns, and they're buying these other things that my customers never bought from me. Okay. So again, it's, if you can create an environment where there's immediate value for the sellers, they're going to want to jump all over it. You'll get rid of this notion of, oh, I'm competing with the online channels. And there's a lot of value to that as well, because from the selling side, you're no longer operating with spreadsheets, which is very common. Being able to add notes or phone calls. Again, I go back to the CRM capability that Oro included from day one. It makes Steve's job easier, because when he's doing what he needs to do for the customers, he's entering that information, and as a company, you're capturing all of this. It's not like Steve has to do the order here, then he has to go to his CRM that's over here and remember to put everything in, which he won't, because who does that every day? You'll wait to the end of the week and forget stuff. So you're doing it right there where you're placing the order, means that the selling company can get much better metrics and data on performance, customer performance, sales cycles, all that kind of stuff. So there's just a lot of downstream value to doing that.
No doubt about it. I've lived that experience firsthand. Prior to joining the e-commerce space, I was a manufacturer sales rep that sold to distribution. And ironically enough, we didn't have a B2B e-commerce platform. They used SAP ERP in the background, but no visibility into inventory, for example.
Exactly.
Not knowing what I had the ability to sell. I think you raised a really strong point. Ultimately, we've talked about this a lot, but salespeople are concerned about the money in their pocket, or the money that ends up in their pocket. And why wouldn't they? They're in sales for a reason, right? But when you don't have visibility into what you're exactly selling, and you have to trust, a different team potentially within a large organization, or, better yet, if you don't have those permissions in place that we talked about earlier, you're kind of left guessing did this order come in through me? Did it come in through a different channel? Did someone just stumble into that distribution outlet and place an order? So I think
Well,
it kind of goes
absolutely.
ways.
Well, and think about the scenario where, okay, the order may have come in through the online channel, but Steve saw it, picked it up and said, listen, they probably need these two other things as well. Or I see an opportunity to sell something else, and hits up the phone, sends an email, note, WhatsApp, whatever he does, and ends up increasing the value of that order. You know, all of that we track in the platform. Okay. So he doesn't have to worry. Actually, it works in his favor because typically he may not have gotten credit for that upsell. Here, it's very, very easy to see that Steve did these things and increased the order value, you know, and we didn't talk about this one, but the whole, if companies are working with RFQs. So, you know, if they have quoting, they offer requests for quotes and things like that. Being able as a seller to manage that process and have the platform just facilitate the mundane back and forth and the boring stuff, you know, and not have to write where's my note that I wrote down what I said, you know, that all goes away. Okay. So it becomes a much easier process to manage quotes. Then you're just focused on, you know, doing the deal, which is what Steve wants to do. Right. So that's another area where there's a lot of benefit if you bring this all together and not have it as a separate system.
Absolutely. I mean, we've talked a lot about sales and customer service, and
Mm-hmm.
clearly those are some, I'd say, power user groups amongst an e-commerce platform.
Yeah.
From an internal perspective of an organization, a merchant that is owning the system. From your experience, Andy, are you seeing these B2B e-commerce platforms bring more value upstream, you know, maybe into product development, into marketing, into finance? And are there any examples that you might be able to share with our audience here?
Yeah. So let me think. That was a very direct question. I think one of the areas, and I alluded to this, that I'm seeing more of that I haven't seen, you know, going back a few years is from a finance perspective, you know, accounts receivable, being able to have that information, make that information available to the buyers. It really cuts down the time needed to kind of go out and chase, get invoices paid and all that kind of stuff. And we're even seeing some customers doing interesting things like, look, you know, you often have account levels, so that, listen, you have $100 credits. Okay. But right now you've got an invoice, if it's outstanding, it's overdue for 90, you know? So listen, when I log in, I get the little notification saying, hey, look, pay this. You can do it right here. We make it easy for you. But as soon as you pay that $90 goes back into your account. So you have $100 of credit again, not just the 10 that's sitting there. Okay. So I've seen a lot of areas or a lot of customers where even finance is getting benefits from doing this, right? Because you're, I suppose teaching would be the word, or educating is a better way. Your buyers that, listen, your online self-service area, you can do a lot of stuff with us as the seller, not just buy stuff. You know, you can get support. You can get educational material. You can talk to finance. You can do your financial stuff here. Okay. So the same benefits work for the buyers, right? I go into one place and I've got my whole view for how I engage with, the seller. The other area we're seeing, upstream is around marketing. It makes a lot of sense. But not everybody connects the dots, but being able to understand cycles, buying cycles, popular products, and that doesn't always work. It depends on, you know, if you're a manufacturer, distributor, that kind of thing. But still, that data is really, really valuable to the marketing team. And not only that, it also helps you on the website itself in terms of, hey, what do we want to showcase? What do we want to highlight? Right. And so connecting those dots so you can actually, based on historic patterns, we're putting the right content in front of the right type of buyer. So that's going to be sometimes marketing in terms of their outreach, but it should also go back into, say, your search, or if we're doing, anything with generative AI, we can feed that data into those components so that the machine, if you will, your digital commerce channel can kind of start living on its own and understanding what buyers are doing and putting the right content in front of them at the right moments. So that I'm an upstream probably wasn't the upstream you were thinking about, that last example, but it's really, really interesting. Again, it goes to operational efficiency because you're not manually having to tune and tweak and create all of these rules. Okay. And that's kind of where we're going, in the industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, the strong reoccurring point here is data. It doesn't leave organizations guessing, right? For the collaborative, mature digital organizations that are able to collaborate internally between sales, marketing, IT, supply chain, finance, there's so many benefits here.
And it's not just data. So the idea of consolidating your data. Okay. And I know that's been a theme in the industry for many, many years, but there's a big argument to be made to use the digital commerce channel or platform, however we want to call it, as an area to consolidate certain types of data, because it makes it really, really easy then to support all the various use cases, both on the buying and the selling side, as opposed to it sitting somewhere, in the cloud. Nothing wrong with that for reporting, but to be able to use it real time, there's a lot of benefit to consolidating these various data silos into the e-commerce platform.
Absolutely. And we've seen so many examples from it, right? I mean, you touched on the finance department, but the ability for customers to pay ACH and, incentivize them to pay ACH so they're not incurring credit card fees. That's, of course, a cost saving efficiencies for your finance team, no longer chasing down one-off invoices, or better yet, going back to the permissions discussion is, hey, I'm sorry, you're such a small customer of mine. I'm not even going to give you the ability to extend term. You're credit card only.
Yeah. No, exactly. And you mentioned the to incentivize from the financial perspective. It's really, really interesting and something that more companies should think about. We have scenarios at multiple different customers where finance can create incentives in terms of paying your invoices earlier that will give you priority on fulfillment or access to limited quantity lines of products. Okay. So think about it. That's really clever. That's smart, right? Stay up to date with your payments. You're going to get priority over here. Okay. And so it's a win-win. It's an easy way because the buyer's going to pay. Okay. But encouraging them to do that quickly by giving them something in return, that's really smart. That's just an interesting way to use the dynamic that we have available in the commerce platform now that we have all the data consolidated and we're building these processes into what I think the back end, the non-transactional part of the commerce capabilities.
Absolutely. Obviously, Andy, the buyer is changing before our eyes, right? We're seeing a younger audience come in, a more digitally mature, even older audience getting experience through well-adopted sites that we all know and use, whether we love them or not. I'm curious to pick your brain on how important you think user experience is as it relates to B2B e-commerce. Whether it be the UI, the UX, and how marketing can best support the organization to, streamline efficiencies for sellers and buyers.
Okay, there is a lot to unpack in this question. Let's just take the changing buyer demographics. I mean, it's real. we're obviously seeing it as an e-commerce agency. Our customers are seeing it. Okay. And they need to plan for it. One of the challenges there is you can have these sort of head scratching moments where, do we really have to, does this really matter? Right. And I'll admit, I'll put my hand up. I'm in the not millennial category. So I'm like, yeah, okay. I don't really need this, but you need to understand that your buyers, to your point, in their day to day, the way they interact with their friends, the way they buy things, it's different. Okay. And so they are expecting that, that service, that customer experience, even in the B2B world. So it is really important to understand and look at, you referred to some of the players that out there on the B2C side that have sort of the expectation for customer experience, the ease at which I can just streamline, quickly check out, that kind of a thing. You need to do that. It is important because it is going to make a difference when your buyers are researching. And do I buy it here? Do I buy it there? So then that leads us on to how do we get it right? Okay. And how far do we need to go with that? Marketing, I think, should be, absolutely an important stakeholder when you're having these conversations, any conversations around e-commerce, understanding, who is our buyer demographic? How do they engage with us? Even before we get to the transactional part, what do we know about them? Perhaps even from the offline world, and have that fed back into the conversation. And then it's a matter of, I think, thinking about what do our customers really need? We've had multiple customers. Braskem is one. UFPI also mentioned to me that they did this, where they actually interviewed some of their top customers and said, listen, we're thinking of doing this. Or if we already have something, we're thinking of making it easier for you. What things would make it easier for you? Okay. I think this is really important because as the seller, the site owner, we can make guesses. And yeah, there's a lot of information out there, basic things we know we can get right or improve on. Fantastic. But actually talking to the customers, you may be surprised about what they feel is important, right? And areas to focus on. So that's something that we would strongly recommend. And we've helped some customers, facilitate those conversations when they're not really sure what questions to ask. But it's a great way to get really actionable feedback that then you can feed into your UX. And then clearly just making sure that you are optimizing the tools you have. Okay. So, no surprise, I'm going to mention Oro. There are a lot of capability in Oro that perhaps we don't activate in that initial MVP. Okay. And that's fine. Right. Let's not bite off more than we can chew, but those features are there for a reason. Okay. They're going to help you or help your buyer do something. So let's not forget about them. Let's come back and revisit those. Okay. Now what do we need to do as we sort of continuously iterate and improve the customer experience? And then there may be other pieces of technology that we want to add to the stack. Okay. I'm thinking things like personalization or, AI tools, search or whatever it might be, and really think about using those. Okay. And not be afraid of them, but just take the time to understand how can they benefit our customers in the buying experience. So sorry, that was a really long answer, but you gave me a really packed question, to be fair.
Yeah, it was a good one. So, I mean, looking at the dozen or so implementations that you've done on Oro Commerce, I mean, if you just had to throw out a number, what percentage of our feature set would you say that these customers are using from the onset?
Wow, that's a really good question. I'd say on average, the MVPs, we're probably using about 50 to 65% somewhere. And it's really difficult to answer that. 50 to 65% of the feature set in some form in the MVP. Okay. With the rest coming in sort of at that next phase afterwards. I know your follow-up question, what it's going to be, so I'll just jump straight into it. Yeah, what aren't they using in the MVP? So quite often it's those areas that we were talking about earlier, empowering customer service, empowering your sales rep. So really making use of all of the CRM capabilities that sit in the platform. Okay. That usually comes as a second wave, because typically that first MVP is focused on the transactional piece. Let's get it up and running. Another area I think that generally comes after that initial MVP is making really good use of the workflow engine. Okay. We built some standard reusable components that use the workflow engine, but it's just stuff that we use to manage certain basic, typical standard features that you would want to have. But really using that to start bringing your processes and enabling them on the platform. That's something that would typically happen also after the MVP. And I think that's the right way to do it, because until you get used to the platform, number one, but almost more importantly, until you get used to selling online to your customers and get their feedback, you probably shouldn't be making too many decisions up front. It's better to start with the MVP, get started, get revenue coming in, get customer feedback coming in, so that you are then building things and releasing things that your customers are going to want. Okay. That's how you're going to really create stickiness and drive adoption first and foremost, both with the buyers, but also with the various teams, as we were talking about inside your organization.
Absolutely. I think, if I'm not mistaken, our B2B workflow engine is pretty unique within the space of competitive vendors and platforms.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when you think about it, whether it's the most simple or most complex B2B engagement, everything is a workflow. From checking out, you mentioned one-step checkout, that's critical, but what happens when there's, a 3 or 5 or even a 12-step checkout process where it has to, be negotiated or approved by a manager? All of this can obviously be created with a simple workflow in the back end. And I think that comes down to also our topic here today, which is, going beyond the transactional element of creating efficiencies. How do you get your products into the B2B landscape? Well, there can be a workflow process that allows you to move them from, step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to populating your e-commerce site.
Exactly. And also adding checks and balances along the way. That's the real value of the workflow capabilities, right? It puts those guardrails around processes. So you're removing risk, and manual error. And also it allows you to, I don't want to say what I usually call it because it's kind of derogatory. Prompt you, that's the nice way of saying it, to, follow up on that action that is in your queue right now. It's like, buddy, this whole workflow is waiting on you to do stuff. Okay. And so making sure that the workflow, the solution will remind you, in the nicest way possible, that you have things to do and you're holding up the process. It allows the organization to see where things are stuck and to learn, hey, maybe we need to change our processes. Okay. So and you're right. It's not, I don't know of any of the other platforms that are out there that you guys would compete with that offer this workflow capability as part of the standard, package. And I could just say we've taken, our customers have made great use of it. Request for quote is another example, where you can have 22-step RFQ processes. Perfect for that, because nothing gets lost and you know exactly where your quote is and what we're waiting for. And so buyer satisfaction goes up, as does your internal teams, because they know exactly where things are. It doesn't get lost. So
absolutely. It goes back to the theme of this conversation around, data integrity and visibility and, honestly, functionality, right? That streamlines the entire organization. Obviously, in an example like an example that you just portrayed with a 22-step workflow process or RFQ process, all that is captured within the CRM, right? Giving visibility to the customer service rep in the case of, Steve's customer calling them directly, they've got the answers. They don't need to guess or waste the time to pick up.
Right. You don't need to email. And the concept of thinking about your commerce engine, your digital commerce channel, beyond just the transactional elements, so many of our customers, this is becoming a real business solution for the company, right? Not just the e-commerce website. And thinking, and when you start to think about it in those terms, building business cases to get the investment to do this, it becomes a lot easier because there are so many more benefits. It's not just your top line online sales revenue. Okay. When you start moving into this area and thinking about the operational needs beyond a transaction, what you're really doing is you're talking about your margin. Okay. And growing your margin through operational efficiencies. So suddenly you're getting top line revenue coming in through the transactional bit, but then starting to use it as a real business tool, as we've been discussing, that goes straight to the bottom line, to your margins, because you're able to do things more efficiently, more quickly, and you're cutting out all the manual stuff so that all of those resources can focus on those valuable tasks that they're really necessary and good at. So that's, if you start thinking about it like that, the business case becomes a lot easier as you're trying to talk to, the stakeholders in your organization, to move in this direction.
Absolutely. And Andy, I would imagine you have a lot more examples to share in that regard, and obviously can help, different manufacturers, distributors, wholesalers develop that type of strategy.
Yeah.
In the case of our audience wanting to try to get a hold of you, Andy, what's the best way to reach you?
Just send me an email. You can either go onto our website, which is now axis.io, or feel free to send me an email, Wagner at axis.io.
And that's AAX.
That is, yes. Yeah, that's correct. AAXIS.io. And we'll include that in the comments somewhere, I'm sure. But yeah, please just drop an email, chase me down on LinkedIn. I'm happy to talk to anybody that has a question, or would just love to have a conversation about, hey, this is where we're at. What do you think we should do? Happy to have those conversations. It's part of my day job, so happy to do it.
Great. Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we just scratched the surface and you've got plenty of other use cases to share. Definitely encourage our audience to reach out to Andy and learn more about some of the multi-billion-dollar companies that he's helped digitally transform and find success with their B2B e-commerce channel. That concludes our episode today. Thank you, Andy, for joining.
So great being here with you again, buddy. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks.